I'm Ryan Dancey. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Alderac Entertainment Group, and I have worked in the MMO field and in the tabletop publishing field for about 25 years. I worked on the 3rd edition of Dungeons & Dragons at Wizards of the Coast, and I co-created Legend of the Five Rings.
All right, I'm Luke Peterschmidt, same thing, about 25 years, started in collectible games. Anyone know what Bakugan is? I was the game designer for Bakugan, so I've worked in the toy industry and in the hobby industry. Well, you know me from the hobby industry. I was brand manager Del 5R. I sold Sabretooth Games to Games Workshop. That was my companies. And now I work for Fun to 11. It's my company for getting creative products out while I continue my consulting business with toy companies like Mattel and Hasbro. And I currently have the #1 show in China called Battle Claw. Battle Claw. Battle Claw. I could sing you the anthem, but I'm not very good.
And it's in Mandarin.
And it's in Mandarin. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm John Zinser. I am the owner of Alderac Entertainment Group. That is the only job I've had for 25 years in the gaming industry. I met these guys through the creation and management of Legend of the Five Rings, and excited to be here.
I'm on. Go ahead.
Look at that look on his face.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I'm done. That's my introduction.
Yeah. All right, show of hands, how many of you have been to a PAX before? All right, how many of you have been to Gen Con?
Oh, awesome.
All right, okay. Excellent. Yeah, this is the first time we've been on the East Coast for a show, and we're trying to figure out who our audience is. So it's good to see that a lot of you have never been to Gen Con.
Yeah.
It should just duplicate, I think.
No. Show of hands, how many of you are game designers looking to get a game published? Okay.
How many of you have already done it? Finished in a box for sale by somebody? Yeah.
Wow, okay.
So what you just learned is the first 95% of game design is fun, and the second 95% is hard. Yeah, it's hard. All right, we're gonna let the tech go. So what else can we just talk about while we're waiting for tech? So how many people have you backed a product on Kickstarter? Try and get a handle on who we're okay, all right. Okay. Thank you for all of that. What other questions will help us narrow this down?
How many of you know how to operate this?
All right, so, okay, so luckily the presentation that we have is just some pictures and a few bullet points. It's not really necessary for the presentation. So we're gonna just go without it and we'll wing it, it's no big deal. So we're gonna talk about what it's like to sell your game design to a publisher. We're gonna talk about what it's like to publish your own game. We're gonna talk about the factors that might make you choose between one of those two options. And then we'll do a little Q&A, and hopefully we can answer any questions that you have. I think collectively here on the podium, the three of us have done about every possible combination of bringing a game to market that there is. So we're reasonably confident we can talk about just about any of those options. So I think we'll start with our comments on selling your design to a publisher, which is something that we're actively interested in. John and I are looking for new games for AEG. So if you happen to have an awesome game, we'd love to hear from you about it. And we'll talk about the pros and cons of why you might want to sell your game to a publisher. Luke, you want to spit some pros or cons out?
Sure.
You can even use this clever list I have if you want to. Oh, that's hard to read.
Okay, so this is selling to a publisher. So publishing is a lot of jobs you might not want. Do you want to deal with the printer? Do you want to deal with a graphic designer? Are you a graphic designer? Do you have that ability to be a graphic designer? Handing off a game to a game publisher lets you make more games. When I worked on Bakugan for 5 years, Eric Lang made 20-something games. He would not have been able to do that had he published them himself. He would have made 3 or 4. Almost everybody I know who starts a company on Kickstarter to make games ends up publishing other people's games because they run out of time to make their own. So you really want to ask yourself, like, what does your success look like? And then understand that if you want to be a publisher, that's likely where you're going to end up, not being a game designer as much as you used to be. You also have the ability to work on more games, but you make less money on each one that you make. And your risk is essentially 0. You pitch, they say no, what are you out? You made a prototype, you had a lot of fun making games. I don't want to take up this whole thing, but I can talk forever.
That's okay. Keep going.
No. I would say another one of the big pros is that the money involved is what I would call fast and slow. You will get a small amount of money from the publisher when you sign your deal up front. And by small amount, I mean hundreds to thousands of dollars, not hundreds of thousands. And then you will get a royalty, and that number could be hundreds to hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on how successful the game is. So you take a small amount of money up front, and then you buy a lottery ticket. And you wait to see how successful your game was, and how successful the publisher was, and how big the market is. And if everything goes well, you cash the lottery ticket, which is an awesome feeling.
What makes a better lottery ticket?
You know, I used to think I knew, but we published Love Letter, and that took everything off the line, right? So the deal for Love Letter was a very small advance and has been very large royalties for the last 5 years, right? So
that game
is the
designer.
perfect lottery ticket for a game designer.
Yeah, I'll say there's another thing for lottery tickets. If you're going to pitch to a publisher, which publisher says yes will affect your lottery ticket odds. Had my little game company got Love Letter, it would not have been a hit. You never would have heard of it. Like, it just wouldn't have worked. When you pitch to a company that has marketing reach, that can take it to Essen and show it to people, your lottery ticket odds start getting much, much better.
Let's talk about some cons. So one of the cons is that if you sell your game to a publisher, somebody else will decide if your game is a success or a failure. You're going to hand your game off to a publisher. It's like handing your kid off to a finishing school. They take charge and will make all of the critical decisions, often including redesigning the art and most of the graphics and art design. So the product, when it gets to store shelves, is the result of the work that the publisher puts in after you sell them your game design, and you have almost no control over any of that. So the downside is that somebody else is going to be the people who are responsible for pretty much determining whether or not your game is a success or a failure. That could also be an upside if you don't have any of those skills, which is one of the pros. Right?
That's right.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about anything else?
So we talk about how difficult it is, you know, getting a game pitched right now, right?
Yeah.
So last year, there were 10,000 releases this year, 10,000 game releases that we know of, right? And every game company here that's got a booth here, we're all looking for the next big thing. We're all looking for the next game that we're going to publish. But it's like drinking out of a fire hose, not out of a water fountain, right? And so it's gotten to a point where we're pitching from your side, if you're pitching to a manufacturer. Your job is to make a really good game and then make our ability to see how good that game is as easy as possible, right? There was a time when people would pitch us games and we would say, well, just send us over a PDF of the rules and some print and play items and we will output that game and we will get to seeing it, right? The games that we look at now are games that the game designer has gone to the nth degree of making sure it was easy for us, right? They've figured out how to pitch us over Skype so that we can actually see the game played before we end up getting a prototype in and playing it ourselves. They make themselves available so that we can ask them questions and have playthroughs so that we're not playing a game incorrectly. You'd be surprised at how many manufacturers play your game incorrectly from prototype stage and make a bad decision based on an incorrect play of your game.
Right.
Game designers that put together amazing prototypes, make sure that you get those prototypes. You know, anything that makes it easier for us to look at your game is going to be helpful to you.
When we receive game pitches, we have something of a formula that we go through when we take the pitch, right? We ask some simple questions. Who are you in the game? Like, who are you? In L5R, you're a daimyo trying to build a successful clan, right? Not who are you personally. What do you do? Which is, in the game, what is the primary game mechanic? How do you actually play this thing? In Monopoly, it's you roll 2 dice and you move a thing around the board, right? And then the last question we ask is, how do you win? And that should be relatively self-explanatory, but it's usually important to know what the victory condition is. And then we often ask designers, what is the coolest thing that happens when we play your game? Every game that is successful usually has one thing about it that happens when you play, and everybody goes, oh my God, it was so cool, right? Like when you play Hearts and you get all the spades. That's just, wow, I did the thing, I shot the moon, right? Yeah. Most successful games have a moment or two in them that have that kind of chilling, awesome effect of, now I'll never play this game differently again. I love how this game is played, right? And then the other thing that we want to know when you come to pitch to us is a bunch of legal stuff. Like, who owns this? Is it you and a partner? Is it just you? Are there a group of people that you work with that collectively own this thing? What rights are you offering us? Is this a deal where we can publish this game anywhere in the world? Or did you already sell this to some guy in Poland who's going to print it in Polish and we just can't print in Poland? And then what exactly is it that you're selling us? Are you selling us a game design? Or are you selling us a game design and some art assets and some graphic design and a patent and we built this app and there's this cool website and, right? And I'll tell you that most of the games we buy are just game design. Like, we don't expect to actually buy a bunch of other stuff. And typically speaking, we usually don't use your art. I think of all the games we published this year, it was just Cat Lady, right?
Cat
That was
Lady,
the only one?
yeah.
So we published maybe, including expansions, 25 to 30 SKUs this year. SKU is a stock keeping unit, it's an individual release. One of them actually had art on it that was brought to us when the pitch came.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I teach a class in critical game analysis at a STEM school, and I tell my kids they need to be able to describe every game in 50 words. Every single one. And it always starts with who are you, what are you trying to accomplish, what do you have to accomplish it with. And if you can't do that in 50 words, then your game has what we call the and problem. My game's like this, and it has this, and it has this, and it has this. And then by the fourth and, no one's listening, right? They want the one thing, the thing that goes, I just never seen that before. It's Dominion, but with dice. You might think Dominion with dice is a bad pitch. It's an incredibly good pitch, right? It's clean and it's tight and it's okay to pitch in relationship to existing games.
Yep. Yep. You want to see the next slide?
Yeah,
It's,
probably.
choosing a publisher. So
publisher.
these are when you are pitching to a publisher and you're trying to figure out who you want to work with. As a designer looking at us, we think you see like a giant wall of the same. Like we all look the same to you in a lot of ways, right? But in fact, all the publishers in this industry are really different. And understanding what makes us all different will help you not only pitch to the publisher that's appropriate for the game that you want to make, but craft your pitch in a way that connects with us in a way that makes sense for us to publish. So some of the things that you might want to consider are the industry reputation. Some companies in this industry have fantastic reputations. Some companies don't. Sometimes that's deserved and sometimes that's not. And you might be the game that helps a company change its reputation. Recent history, what have they been publishing? Like not what are they best known for, but what have they published lately? Which gives you some insight into where that company is going, what they think is important for them now. A lot of companies that have been around the industry for a long time will have these legacy games that they've been publishing for a long time, but they don't look anything like the games that they're actively developing and publishing today. Community reputation, same thing as industry reputation. How do you feel about the publisher? How do the players think about that publisher? And then their portfolio, which is essentially think about all the games that they have and look for holes. If it's a publisher that has a lot of RPGs, they probably don't want another RPG. They might want a board game. Or if they are a miniatures game, maybe they want a cool party game. Like you want to help them fill a hole in their portfolio. Unless you know that they're like Games Workshop, like we only do miniatures games. Not a lot of point pitching a non-miniatures game at Games Workshop. What's their go-to-market strategy? So if you are going to sell your design to a publisher and you want that publisher to make a lot of money for you, they have to have a good strategy on how to get your game to market and make it sell. So when you're talking with them, you should be asking them, what is your strategy to take this product into market and what do you think you'll do? Like, give us an estimate of how many units you think you'll sell and where you think you'll sell them and in what time frame you think you can sell them in.
And I don't know is not a good answer to that question.
Right.
If a publisher says, I don't know to you, you should, if they are expressing interest in your game, you should push them to give you an answer. They can give you averages of other games that they've sold and things that they've done. I don't know is never a good answer to that question.
Yeah, and the answer you're likely to get is same as last time. Right. Unless your game is truly unique, the answer you're probably going to get is, you saw the last game we did. This was our go-to-market strategy for the last game we did. Guess what? We're going to put you through what we're good at. So expect that.
And you'll probably get a range. Like no publisher in the industry likes to kind of admit to the small ball stuff. So we all estimate high, or if you ask me how many copies of this game you'll sell, I'll say 25,000 because that's what we sold at Mystic Vale. But we'll try to give you an honest answer. It won't be. We're not going to just make up a number and give you a bullshit number.
And publishers are dealing with a range of success levels, right? A success for some companies is 5,000 copies of a game, and they're like, oh, that's a good seller.
Yeah, right.
But our industry is dealing with companies who are across the hall from each other in this thing, who have sold 800 copies of a game this year, and other companies who have sold 100,000 copies of a game this year. And those companies don't look very different from each other when you're walking down the hall.
Yes, can I ask a question real quick? So can everyone who says they want to be a game designer put their hand up again real quick? Okay, how many of you want to do this as your primary source of income? Okay. I just want to get a check, because some of the things we're talking about are the steps you take for a career.
Yeah.
Right, if your goal is, I just have this one game I want to get published, then you sort of have a different set of questions. Right? Maybe it's just, I want to see this thing done the best it can be done. I want to hold my product in my hand and go, this is my thing.
Look, Mom,
I made $800. I don't care. I would give it to you for free if you would make my game and make it look great and be in store. So just know the difference there, because some of the stuff we're talking about is how do you become Eric Lang? How do you become a repeat game designer?
Right. And the last thing I would say is talk about the deal terms. There's a standard set of terms in this industry which most publishers start from, which is a small upfront guarantee and then a back-end royalty. And you earn out the guarantee. So if we paid you $1,000 for your design, the first $1,000 of royalties don't get paid to you. They are just credited against the royalty that you were paid until the amount of money that you were paid in your advance is exceeded, and then you start to get royalty payments on top of that, right? That's the quote-unquote the standard deal. It usually also assumes that you sign over all the rights to the game. So the publisher becomes the holder of the copyright, and the publisher is responsible for the art, the graphic design, trademarks, all the legal stuff that happens after it. So you're essentially selling your game to a publisher. It's not uncommon for a contract to have a reversion clause in it, which says that after a certain amount of time, or if there haven't been a certain amount of sales, the rights to the game design will come back to you, the designer, and you can try and find another partner. You almost never will get the art assets back. It's a one-sided thing. The publisher pays for them, and the publisher keeps them. But you might get the design back. So the plus and minus is, if it's a great game, you're never going to get it back, because the publisher's going to make money on it, and
you're going to make money on it.
You're going to make money on it, and the reversion clause will never get triggered. So the only time you're likely to get your game back is if the publisher goes out of business, or if they catastrophically fail to bring the game to market successfully and nobody buys it.
So I'm going to pre-ask a question, because I think someone's going to answer it anyway.
Sure.
For you two guys, of games you've been pitched, or stories from the industry of all the times, how many times have you heard a story of someone stealing someone else's game design?
Once.
Once, yeah.
Yeah, the WCW game.
Yep, once. So if you're worried about your game getting stolen and you're like, I don't want to tell someone about my secret, don't.
Yeah.
There's so many games to make.
And
So I have a caveat to that, because I've actually been telling game designers a little bit of a caveat to that. I think
agree
that
with
the way that the gaming community has grown up now, a lot of you are going to design meetups and sharing ideas with other designers. I don't think that there is any designers in those meetups who take your ideas and go home and turn them into their games. What I do think happens in the industry is if you have a very unique idea or a solution to a problem that the group think has not figured out yet, that somebody at your game meetup will talk to somebody else at another game meetup because they attend a few, and then somebody on the West Coast will hear from their friend over Skype, and then they will put your solution to work in their game because they haven't been able to solve that. So that's the only thing. Like, if you feel like you've hit on a lightning bolt moment and you can't find any other games that do that thing, I would be not super careful, but sort of reasonably careful about how much in the echo chamber that idea goes before you've pitched it or before you're ready to publish it.
Yeah.
But really not at the publisher level, right?
No,
Because publishers
not at all.
don't tend to steal ideas from designers.
Nope.
It would be bad for us. If we got known as a publisher that stole your idea, why would anybody ever pitch to us?
Yeah, the one example Ryan and I laughed about was we were working at a publisher who we signed a game design that another publisher had not paid for and taken. And we actually sued on behalf of the game designer to get that game designer royalties. And that game designer didn't even work for us. Like, that's how serious we take inventor relations. Like, we will not hurt a game designer. It's just terrible. But you should know that sometimes ideas come up at the same time. That does happen.
Yes, and that's exactly what I was going to say. The flip side is that publishers don't sign NDAs. We can't.
Nope.
We cannot promise you that the idea that you pitch to us won't show up in one of our games, because we see so many games from so many designers that there's a really good chance that it will. There just aren't that many new ideas under the sun. And we're really buying theme and mechanics and well-written rules.
The combination of things.
Right, exactly. And so, yeah, you might have had this idea for how this piece is, altered on a board that shows up in a game we make 2 years later. We didn't steal your idea. It was either brought to us by the designer whose game we did buy, or it was just one of those things that became a part of the common toolbox of game designers in the industry, right?
The term is parallel development. It happens all the time.
It happens all the time. And so if we signed NDAs, we would constantly be in a situation where we couldn't publish a game that came to us completely legitimately because somebody might think that we were breaking our NDA, so we can't sign them.
And for my company, it's another reason. I don't sign NDAs because I'm a small company, and if you hand me a game that my company I think is great, but we're not the right company for, I want to go to these guys and say, John, Ryan, you got to check this game out. It's perfect for AEG. Yeah. This is an industry where we help each other way more than we compete in the classic sense. I have sent game designers to other companies with great games time and time again. Yeah. I only have the ability to make so many games a year, right? I have things to do.
We like each other too much. It's one of the great things about the tabletop industry, right? We're all pretty much good friends. Like, we like each other. We don't want to screw each other. It's really nice. All right, okay, so self-publishing, which I suspect everybody wants to really hear about, right? Yeah, okay. Although you'll probably end up with a publisher, you want to think about publishing on your own. So this is the road not taken, the other road, the second road. So Luke and I, we used to have a consulting company, and when prospective designers would come to us, the very first question we would ask them is, do you want to publish your game, or do you want to see your game published? And a whole lot of those people said they wanted to publish their game, mostly because they didn't understand how hard it was going to be.
Yeah. And
So-
it used to be that would cost, by the way, like in this Kickstarter world we're in, people think you can start a game company for free.
Yeah.
You get all the money first. When I started Sabretooth Games, we had to find $250,000 and put my kids' college fund and 12 credit cards out to the max to get our first product out the door.
Yeah.
Like we didn't have Kickstarter to lean on. Kickstarter has changed things.
Yeah.
And it worked out for us, but you know what? You work a lot harder when it's your own money on the line like that.
My parents took a second mortgage on their house so we could print Legend of the Five Rings.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how hard publishing used to be. So
Yeah.
if we tell you it's hard now,
We're all like battle scarred,
it's not as hard as it used to be.
Yeah, okay, so how many people in here would like to become your own publisher? Would like to publish the game yourself? Okay, that's a good number. All right.
Third.
That used to be the traditional path. And in this industry, most of the companies that you're probably familiar with were started by people who wanted to publish their own games. Steve Jackson Games, White Wolf, TSR, Wizards of the Coast. Like, these are all companies that began life AEG because the only way to get a game into production at that time was to be a self-publisher and to learn how to do it. That day is now past, but there are still a whole lot of people who are creating publishing ventures. Stonemeyer Games, Jeremy Stegmeyer, who did Scythe, right? It's a complete startup. It's like an old school business. The guy who does Burning Wheel, Luke Crane, who is also the Kickstarter game manager or whatever, right? He really old schooled it. He built a whole new gaming company on the back of a role-playing game, which is crazy hard. Before Kickstarter.
Yeah, Numeric.
Yeah, right. Monty Cook, right? He's got his whole thing. So it can be done. It is still being done. It's just really, really hard. But it is so fulfilling. I mean, all three of us have started our own game publishers. We bootstrapped all the way from scratch. It's an amazing feeling to know that you did it. The whole thing. It's all on you, and you succeeded. It's an amazing feeling.
Yeah, total creative control.
Yeah.
Like, I started Fun to 11 with my business partner because I wanted to make the games I wanted to make with only people I wanted to work with, right? And that is something you don't get with the game publisher.
Yeah.
And it's a crazy company. We don't operate like anybody else. We're a bad example if what you want to do is build a company to be a juggernaut. We have our day jobs, but we still manage to publish great games. And when my employee has a crazy idea to make a scarf that comes out of a unicorn, right? We just make it. Like, we have total control over everything our company makes. I make the game I published 20 years ago when away doing press checks for my very first card game. Having complete control is amazingly satisfying. But I will tell you, it's only really possible for us because I've been in the industry so long. When I needed to talk to a printer, I'd done it before. When I talked to a graphic designer, I've done it before. An artist, I've done it before. A lawyer, I've done it before. So it was a little easier for me to do this as a casual throw-off business, as a side venture, than it might be for anybody else. But not impossible.
Yeah.
Infinitely doable.
So I think if you're seriously thinking about self-publishing, right, you want to get out a big spreadsheet and you want to walk through the life cycle of your game, right? We're guilty of it as a game company. We oftentimes only look as deep as the development side, and then we forget about a lot of the other stuff, and we have to remind ourselves that stuff exists. Because it is not the fun part, but it is the important part, right? After
That's
you
his
have a great
job.
game.
My job is all that stuff he forgets.
Yeah. So if you build a spreadsheet of the life cycle of your game and then you bullet point all of what you think are the most important parts, you should ask and answer all of the questions about how you would do that after your game gets published, before you take your game to Kickstarter, because that's likely the path if you're a self-publisher now, right? The idea of being a self-publisher and buying a 10x10 booth at PAX and at Gen Con and sitting in the ghetto and trying to get people to play your game is a whole lot different than figuring out how to build up your social media for your game and growing through Kickstarter, right? Yeah. One of the things about Kickstarter is that you can start with a small game, build up the player base. If you deliver your promises for those players, then you can move on to your next game. A good chunk of those players are going to come with you because you've taken care of them as a customer, and then they're going to move on to the next product you have. That's no different on either side of the aisle, right? If you're a self-publisher, you promise small, deliver big. Those customers will come back for the next time that you make a promise because they want to see what you can do.
So some options for self-publishing. Kickstarter, which is a bucket, which means all crowdfunding. And we'll talk a lot about Kickstarter in a little bit. Brokers and industry reps. There are people in the industry who will basically work with you to get your game published. They will be me. They will be the operating officer that will tell you how to print and how to ship and how to invoice and how to make a deal with a distributor. And they may actually do some of those things on your behalf. They get paid a commission or they will take a fee. And they are of a variety of reliabilities, and you should ask around and get reputation insight from lots of people before you hire one. You can partner with a publisher. So sometimes you could potentially bring a game that is basically done to a publisher and say, I did it. I just want you to publish it. I want you to do the last 30% of the business. Get it into production and get it into distributors' hands. But I did all the work. I want to be responsible for the whole thing. There's a relationship we call the studio model, which is where a publisher will pay a small group of people a fee to work on and develop a game, and at the end of that process, the game is handed over to the publisher. So that small studio will probably be responsible for the creative vision of the game, but somebody else will be monitoring their progress and managing them up to the point when it goes into production and development. And then the last one is the independent three-tier publisher. This industry has 3 tiers. Publishers sell to wholesalers, distributors. The distributors sell to retailers, and the retailers sell to end consumers. That is the oldest model in the industry. Everything else above that list is relatively new.
Yeah, if you want to look at the real short version of how the industry works, there's a series of videos I put up called Tabletop University that goes through how all the money flows in these different processes.
Nice plug.
Yes, that was pretty good, right?
That was good.
So you can go watch those, Tabletop University, something's got something, I don't care. But it answers these questions about where the money goes, which is what you're all going to want to know.
Right. So how many people in here have considered starting a Kickstarter project and running your own Kickstarter?
Right on.
All right. And how many of you have backed a project on
Yeah, we are
Kickstarter?
so.
Did we do that?
Everybody.
I was
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that's good. So, all right. So we have
leave
lots of backers.
We should leave lots of time for questions.
Yeah, we got a half an hour.
Yeah.
So we're good. Okay, so let's talk about how to pick a path.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have a game, at least you have some 3x5 cards and a bag full of components, and you think it's good. What do you do next? Luke?
Yeah. Well, me, I publish it if I like it. So I like publishing my own stuff. Obviously, I like creative control. I would look at the game and I'd look for partners if I was anyone in this building, in this room here, who can make it better. And I don't mean partners necessarily publishers. If I'm going to do it myself, I'm going to look for artists to work with. I'm going to look for the rest of the team.
What about types of games? Do you think there's this game is really hard to make?
Yeah. If you're going to make a miniatures games, you're going to need help and a lot of money. Like it's just, that's a category of games that's really expensive to do yourself. If you want to make a game that's all cardboard, pretty much doable by anybody at this point.
Boxes, bunch of cards in a box.
Yeah, a bunch of cards, tokens, dice. We are living in a world that it's very easy to get a game made compared to what it used to be. If you want to just go to Panda and say Panda, Panda's a printer that coordinates overseas printing for US-based companies. They will get you a prototype and they will help you right along the path to making your game.
So be forewarned, all of those $50,000 to $80,000 Kickstarters that you see,
Yeah.
right? Those games are barely breaking even if they don't have royalty deals and payment deals with artists and graphic designers and a whole bunch of other people, right? So those are, anything between $50,000 and $100,000 is a starter deal, right? Like you can get your game published and not go broke for that amount of money, but you're only going to sell 1,200 copies of your game, and then you've got an uphill battle from there.
Yeah. My first product that my company did, my business model was take all the money from Kickstarter, print as much product as I could, ship the Kickstarter backers, sell the rest of the product through the 3-tier channel. That is very much harder to do now than it was 5 or 6 years ago. And when my game launched, it was like the 7th biggest game on Kickstarter. It did $60,000, which is now like, I don't know, 800th on the list. But yeah, that business model worked for me. I have less than 20 cases of that product left on a 7,000 or 8,000 print run that I paid for entirely with somebody else's money.
All of these improvements in the system are the reason why things have gotten so hard. Like the barrier to entry to become a publisher is so much lower because now you can use Kickstarter. The ability to physically make a really good product is so much lower because there are companies in China that can figure out how to do it for you at a really low price. The ability to market something has dropped way down because you can focus on internet marketing and not have to go and do the really hard, go to a convention every weekend thing, right? The problem is all of that stuff getting easier has made it so that there are a ton of really good games that you have to compete against. So John and I think there are 10 to 15 what we call mid-tier companies in the publishing industry, which are essentially the peers of AEG. They are companies that look like our company. They have roughly the same amount of people on staff. They sell roughly the same kind of games. Just those companies will make 400 new games in 2017. 400 games. And that doesn't include Fantasy Flight and the Asmodee Collective, and that doesn't include Wizards of the Coast, and that doesn't include Games Workshop, and it completely doesn't include the 1,000 guys who made a $500 to $50,000 game on Kickstarter, right? So the ability to produce great games easily has meant that there are a ton of great games.
Yeah.
It's a golden age to be a player. It's
Oh my
a
gosh.
very difficult age to be a publisher.
Yeah.
One of the things I was going to say about choosing the right path is you want to make a really good self-assessment of your ability. You need to understand what your strengths and weaknesses are, and what is your tolerance for risk. So, like I said, my parents mortgaged their house so we could print Legend of the Five Rings, and I famously spent a good chunk of the following months under my desk puking in a garbage can because the stress was so high, right? If you are not a person who handles stress well, you want to try and arrange your publishing plan to reduce your stress level. If you don't know how to run Photoshop and make really cool graphics, you either have to find somebody else to do that for you or bring on a partner. If it makes you uncomfortable to call somebody on the phone and say, how many cases of that would you like? You're probably going to have to find a salesperson. Think about your personal ability to do all the hats in these jobs. And when you realize that that's really not something I can do, you have to find an answer for it. Yeah.
I think we're all pretty risk tolerant up here.
Yeah, we're probably over.
We're probably over the line.
Of course. Well, yeah, we're the guys who made our own companies and survived the experience, right? There's a lot of our friends tried it and didn't succeed and left.
When we all got in, it was 94, post-Magic time, right? Everybody was coming into the industry.
Crazy.
That's happening again right now with Kickstarter. This is a time where a bunch of people are going to get in, and my guess is in 15 years, it's going to be a bunch of some people from this room on this panel telling the next group of people they were in the Magic Kickstarter age when they got their game done, and it was amazing.
Right. All you had to do was just post this thing on Kickstarter, and the money just flowed in. It was so easy.
So before we get to questions, I want to say one thing. It's really easy from the outside, particularly Kickstarter, but also in the industry, to look at a game and then look at a game and say, look how successful it got, and think it was just the game. All that stuff in the middle you rarely see. When you see a Kickstarter do $300,000 in an hour, that's not because the game is great. It's because they had lined up their backers to be there in hour one. And that lining up of the backers took a ton of work, right? But you don't see it. When you see a game for like Dice City, you sold out when it launched at Essen, right? AG, great game. It sold out because you guys did a ton of work, and it was great work. So success often looks like it just happened. Almost never.
I like to look at this, the Seventh Continent guys, right? So the Seventh Continent guys did a year of hard, grinding groundwork to lay the groundwork in France for that Kickstarter to have its success the first time, right? So they were an overnight success. They put in a ridiculous amount of backbreaking work that we look at as a game manufacturer, and I'm like,
hats off.
The only time I've ever done that was '94 when we launched Legend of the Five Rings. Right?
Laser
we
Riders,
hungry and desperate, and we we loved that product so much that we could demo it every day.
And anyone seen Laser Riders? So Laser Riders is a game by some friends of mine, and they worked a year doing the same thing, and then they sold that game to a publisher. They didn't even publish it themselves. So they put in the same amount of work to make a publisher successful. Right?
So they felt like they had generated enough awareness that the publisher was like, okay, we'll just cash in. Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. So before we get to questions, I want to talk a little bit about economics and a bunch of numbers. I'm going to try not to bore everybody, but it's important to know, right? I know.
10 is the number, or 11.
The gaming industry runs on what we call the rule of 5. And the rule of 5 means for every $1 that it costs you to make a product, the suggested retail price is $5. So if it costs $5 to make a product, the SRP should be $25. And that is based on the need to sell to the wholesalers, who sell to the retailers, who sell to the end users. Everybody in that process takes a cut. And then Kickstarter comes along, and you get 92% of the money. So there are games on Kickstarter that have costs that are so high that if they were put into sale in the retail channel, they would be $200 or $300 games, and the market is probably not there for them, right? So there's now this difference where there are games on Kickstarter that have really high costs that are priced like the games you see on store shelves, and then there are games that are on store shelves that have much lower costs and thus have a lot smaller number of components. But you should just know that it's it's roughly 5 times your cost of goods is what your retail price is going to be. It's not uncommon for the royalty structure built into a product to be around 10%. That would include the designer royalty, royalties to people who might hold underlying IP, like if you were going to do a Spider-Man game, like Marvel has to get paid. You might be paying a royalty out in place of money to a designer or a artist or a graphic designer. And then there's cost to ship. Shipping, it turns out, is really freaking expensive. It costs AEG, who have a pretty good deal with UPS, it costs us about $2.50 to ship a $40 to $60 game from our warehouse to a distributor. So, and that $2 is in that times 5 number, right? So maybe it costs us $5 to make a game, and then we have, you know, $2 of shipping, and then we have $1.50 of overhead to get it processed and ready to go. And now our like $8.50 game is on sale, and that's why it's $40 or $50. That's where those numbers come from. It's not uncommon to spend $10,000 to $50,000 in cash on the graphic design and art assets that go into a game. And the more you spend, the better it looks. And we live in an era where everything looks awesome. So if you pay for cheap art, you will have a problem unless your cheap artist happens to be awesome.
Yeah, and so specifically for you, if you're pitching your games, we're working on a game now. It's a huge, big box, the JRPG thing. That game could never make it at retail. It's just too expensive.
The cost is too high.
So if you're pitching like a big game, like a Gloomhaven, right? Look for people that do Kickstarter projects, even if they're a publisher. You guys have done one. Other School Mini or Nots does Kickstarters as well, because that product will never show up at retail. It'll just be too expensive. I mean, it's $24 a box to ship some of these things. That's insane.
Anything else you want to mention about cost, John?
No?
Now let's get questions.
So there's a pink line right here, and the enforcer is going to have a microphone. And so if you guys could line up at the pink line, and we'll just take the questions in order.
And iambic pentameter only.
Iambic pentameter. That's right. If you can do it in Latin.
Little Shakespeare joke back there.
Nice.
Well, this is going to be, so we got a lot of people. We're going to try to be super quick with our answers.
Yeah, we have 22 minutes to answer your questions.
Let's go.
All right, number 1.
Well,
You're good.
testing. I'm going to be really quick because I've got one question that you guys haven't answered. I'm actually looking to publish only. I've got a bunch of people that are game designers that don't want anything to do with the publishing. What do you have advice for people that are looking to publish other games?
Build the biggest social network you can and get out in front of people before you ever make a product. So if you had a booth here or you were at an Unpub event or any designer meetup or playtest meetup, bring your entire group of games and start your mailing list, because you're going to sell if you go Kickstarter. Are you playing Kickstarter?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to sell to their friends and family first. Everybody gets one of those. Every game designer gets like, hey, you never backed my game.
Right.
And,
okay.
But then by game 10, I'm like,
Schneebel.
yeah, it's never happening for me again. So that social media net list has to get worked up. You're never going to sell if you just drop it on Kickstarter. You're going to have to do that first. But once you get one, the second one's going to be better, and the third one's going to be better. So you just got to make it through those things. Keep your expenses tight and make the smallest product you can first. Like, this game is $9. This game's going to be $190. Like, it's I don't know what it's going to be. It's going to be insane.
So it's networking that you really...
So
Customer
network, make sure that you have, again, I'm a big fan of that spreadsheet, right? Make sure you've got the spreadsheet and you've answered all the questions about this. Go to the Gamma Trade Show in March,
Yes.
right? Like, so the Gamma Trade Show, where it's unlike this, all of us will be sitting in a bar and chit-chatting about business, and then you just, like, start talking to those guys and ask them, like, have your list of questions that you want to get answered. We're happy to answer them.
Yeah.
It's just in the place that we're at, it makes it hard. So at a place like PAX, it's hard for me to get time with you. But at the Gamma Trade Show, if we're sitting in the bar, no problem at all.
We,
All right, let's
we
roll.
were all the beneficiaries of amazing help from publishers that were in the industry when we started, and we want to pay it forward.
Yeah.
So everybody on this panel, and I can almost guarantee you, almost everybody upstairs in the exhibit hall would be happy to sit down with you and give you a half hour to talk about your plan.
All right, next up.
Great.
Hello, I'm working on designing a card game, and my question is, how do I go about contacting someone as a designer to a publisher? Like,
So
where do I
that
go
is
look
that
at
is a good
information?
question, right? So I do know that the game designers right now are, they're having trouble getting pitch meetings with a lot of game companies, right? So persistence without being annoying is the way to get your game pitched with game companies. The first contact with game companies should be you asking them how they like for games to be pitched, right? When they don't answer, you don't get annoyed. You just wait
Ask them 6
30
months,
days
yeah.
and you ask them again. when they ask you for the shortcut, so we ask all of our folks that we're doing pitches from to send us a sell sheet now, right? And we're using that sell sheet to determine which meetings we're going to take at the shows that we do. And we don't take pitches over the internet anymore, right? Like you can't send us a game and then we'll play it and tell you what we think of it, right? So I would build a list of the publishers I want to work with. I would start contacting their customer service and asking them how that they would like to pitch games. I would put a number of game shows on my catalog, not busy game shows that a lot of the manufacturers go to. So like Gen Con and this show, really hard for us to take pitches from anybody. But I was just at Board Game Geek. I actually got on a plane this morning and flew here so I could be on this panel. Board Game Geek is much more relaxed. Right? You can go to Board Game Geek and players wanted to find game companies and play a game with them and then talk to them about your game, right? Make friends with other game designers who have gotten games published. Find game groups that have game designers who've made that contact already. Get them to play your game and use them as the step inside the door. Most game designers, when they play a friend's game that is a good game, they will recommend that game to a publisher. It makes it easier for us to look at a game that comes with a recommendation from a game designer that we already trust.
Do a quick internet search for games accepting pitches. You'll find that there are a couple of websites that have all the contact information for all of the different companies that are accepting pitches.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. Okay.
Yep, you bet.
So I'm looking to publish a role-playing game. So how is that process different, and are there different publishers I should be talking to, different, versus board games, I guess?
So you want to self-publish the role-playing game, or you want to
I really
find a...
don't want to. I think it seems like publishing is a really exhausting process, and...
Go talk to this guy.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it would be nice to still have the rights to my game, but I don't really want to have to do all the legwork of all that stuff, to be honest.
There's a lot fewer RPG publishers there used to be, but the people who do publish RPGs are pretty visible, and I suspect that they're just like the rest of us. They take pitches.
Right.
So you could probably talk to like the Goodman games and the Monty Cook games and the Dream Pod.
Yeah, but those guys are publishing a lot of their own things, right? So you know where I'd start? I'd start with Studio 2 Publishing.
Sure.
They're the biggest publisher of small
Independent,
press
yeah.
role-playing games, and they are extremely nice guys.
Yeah.
They do all of our distribution for us. Tell them that John said to call, and they'll
See how that gets you.
I'm mad at Frank. So.
Yeah, there you go.
All right.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
Hi, so I actually have a similar question. I've been working on a sci-fi based RPG for the last 4 years. And I'm kind of reaching this point where I'm probably about a year away from where I'm ready to kind of let go of it. And I don't know if I should self-publish because I want to, in theory, hopefully it'll do well, and I want to keep working on more content for that RPG world. But realistically, hopefully. But so I don't know, like, what route should I take? Self-publish or find a publisher.
So are you out at conventions?
This
growing
is
your
my
base of players
first
for the game yet?
kind of step into conventions. I've play tested it. I've done some alpha and beta tests with various groups, and I need to play test it a lot more. I know that.
Do you have the art?
I don't. I'm not an artist.
Okay,
So that's
more
one
than
of
a year
my
away.
lacking asset.
Yeah, you're more than a year away from publishing if you don't have the art yet for a role-playing game. I would suggest that the next step for you is to put it out there in the world, find some conventions that focus on role-playing game stuff, get a number of tables set up, build your pitch for the local convention group, see how many people come and sign up and play the game, start to build a little bit of a mailing list, and then and while you're at those conventions, go talk to all of the artists who have got little artist alley booths, who are starter-up guys who are looking to do their thing, and find some similar thinking people to potentially create a little bit of a team around it so that when you do go talk to a publisher, you've got more of a package to sell them.
So I would say, this is my advice for all role-playing game questions in general. There's basically two paths for role-playing games right now. Path one is you self-publish and you print a 300-page softcover, perfect bound book, and that is your role-playing game product, and you'll sell between 50 and 500 of those games if you're lucky. If you're really lucky, you'll sell 5,000 games and you'll be a superstar. You can do everything yourself. There are a bunch of websites that will help you. There's some pretty big communities out there that love those kind of independent RPGs. There's a lot of creativity out there in that space, and I respect all those people so much because they're working really, really hard for creative rewards, not for financial rewards. If you want to publish, if you think you have a game that could be published, multiple books, hardcover, from a serious publisher, you're talking to them now, and you're 5 years away from that game being on store shelves.
Yeah, 3 to 5, I would say. But
Yeah. All right.
Hi there. So me and my group are currently in NYU studying game design, and we're currently finishing up our final projects. Our final project is a board game that we aim to pitch to publishers. What I'm wondering is kind of what is the absolute standard, well, not the absolute, what's the standard for a prototype that is fit for pitching with?
Oh, so I was fascinated. I used to be a West Coaster like these guys. And then I came out to the East Coast and I started seeing these game prototypes that were amazing. Yeah. I'm like, what are you wasting all this time for? Because the games that were pitched in the West Coast were like, here's some cards with some Sharpie marks on them. Good publishers can look past a bad prototype. It's helpful for you to make a really good prototype so that you get good feedback and good UI feedback, but like they said, you're going to redo all the art anyway. So unless your school has a program that is also partnering with some art asset creation, you're making amazing art, I don't think your prototype has to be all that nice.
It needs to be easy to understand and easy to play, right?
Yeah.
Like that is the first thing. It needs to be, it needs to go to the publisher with no work required. Right? They can't be putting together pieces and cutting up things and doing that stuff. That's a huge barrier to entry, right? The nicer your prototype is, the better chance that we are going to sit down and play it. If I've got 5 games to look at on a Sunday afternoon, and one of them is a really nice prototype, I am likely going to bump that one to the top of the list of games that I'm going to play.
Yeah, both because it shows you have a level of seriousness and commitment to it. But the last game I picked up from someone else, well, two games ago, it was pitched to me with cards with one number scribbled on them.
Right.
And I saw that game and I went, nope, I can make a game out of this. There's something magical here. And then I went and paid for 600 pieces of art, right? I mean, it's doable to pitch low or high.
Yeah.
I would say if you pitch in person, you don't need to do nearly as much work as if you
I
ship
would
it
agree
in.
with that.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
And good luck. Good luck. It's awesome.
Hey, I have a is this a thing question.
Awesome. I love those. It's always a thing. Think outside the box.
Okay. My brother and I have been making mega games recently, and we make them super cheap, maybe like $100 worth of materials, and then we get about $1,000 in the black for every month or so.
Can you tell us what you define as a mega game?
Oh, yeah, I forget that it still hasn't been heard of by some people. It's like half board game, half LARP for like 50 to 1,000 people. You rent a venue. You've got like 4 mini game stations. Teams split up and come back. Okay.
It's an experience.
Yeah. So we just made an LLC for ourselves like literally yesterday, and we want to make our first board game. So a problem you've probably heard a million times is I don't have any of those art skills or distributing skills, but I'm terrified of losing creative control. So is this a thing? Why not print and publish? Like put it up on Kickstarter and go like pitch to people while it's running, and then if it succeeds, does anyone ever just take 50 grand and say like, here, I'll give you a ton of money, just let me keep creative control, or give me reversion clause of like 6 months?
Yeah, those two things never happen.
Yeah.
You won't get a ton of money and creative control. What you might
No.
get is a ton of
He
money.
wants to know if he
No,
can
no.
give us a ton of money
Yeah.
to keep creative control.
Yeah, like let me make
Yeah,
this.
that's a model.
That doesn't happen either. And we would obviously, I mean, if somebody came to us and said, listen, we believe in this product enough that we're willing to stake part of what it's going to cost to do the game, but we want creative control. What a publisher is going to look at that point is, okay, how good is the pitch, right? Is your creative vision something that I want to buy right now, or is your creative vision something that I want to fix? If it's something that I want to fix, I'm probably not going to do the deal, even if you're willing to do it, because it's our reputation on the line.
I do think partnership deals happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where somebody goes to a publisher and says, I want to buy in.
Yeah, absolutely.
It can be done, right?
And if you're doing these events and you're getting 50 to 1,000 people each time that you're doing it, you've already starting to build a mailing list of people who are interested in the experience that you give them, right? That's also a valuable asset, right? If you've got a whole bunch of people who are already fans of you or your products, that's something that a manufacturer is going to be interested in as well.
And although I'm sure you will hear this from some publishers, any publisher who thinks that being on Kickstarter means that that product can't be sold is just wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We're
it's-
happy to look at games that were Kickstarted.
Yeah, I will tell you that there's a dead spot for Kickstarter. Like, if you have a huge hit on Kickstarter, yeah, any publisher is going to take your game.
Yeah.
If you have a medium level hit on Kickstarter, it's like you just got voted thumbs down on American Idol, right? I mean, even though you might make a lot of money on that, you might do a $100,000 Kickstarter and pocket 30 grand, and then be like, no one wants my game. Why not?
Yeah. That's
Because you're not enough of a hit.
Yeah.
Right.
But if you hardly got anything, and we think the idea is great, we'll publish it.
Oddly.
Listen, I think that all of the near peers have taken games that have done that. But you know,
smart
a
ones,
good
yeah.
game that has been done well and then it's pitched in its almost complete format. Of course, we're totally open to that.
What is
All
the
right, next up.
average reversion length of time?
One more time.
The average reversion clause length of time?
So we do 2 to 5 years. We do 2 to 5 years. So our contract is usually a 2-year or 3-year auto renew, and then every 2 years after that, as long as we've hit a threshold of payment to you as the designer, we get to continue to publish the game. AEG's given back a whole bunch of games to designers because we've been sort of leaking out income to them, and you know, the second we don't think we're going to do something with a game, we return it. So. But I'd say 2 to 3 years is safe.
Yeah. All right, let's run through these super fast.
Yep.
Ryan, you get this
Good.
one.
All right.
All right.
It's a speed round, lightning round.
All right, real quick. If part of your game design you also put in a little thought in changing a traditional business model, is that something a publisher would want to hear, or do you just want to stick to the game design aspects?
We love innovative and creative new ideas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's great.
Beautiful, thank
It's
you.
usually better.
Yeah.
You know, 10 cards in a booster pack for $9, that was love letter. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm currently designing like a kind of Euro game based on my time in the New England fishing industry for most of my life. But sort of the other side of the question that the guy from NYU asked, at how much development do you guys do with games that you as a publisher take on average? And at what point in the design process is like the minimum threshold that someone should bring something to you?
Oh, I'm the wrong end of the bell curve for this because I do a lot.
Sure.
I think people do less and less as.
Oh, no, we do a ton of work.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Oh, my God, almost nothing is
So
published.
our perfect world, so we do a ton of work. So our perfect world is an additional 20% of the work, right? That the game comes to us.
Plus
and
art.
it's plus art.
Plus art,
Yeah. So the game comes to us and it's in really good shape, and all the basic mechanisms work, and we like the designer, and we bounce back and forth to get that extra 20% done. Oftentimes, we will look at a game and like it at its 80%, and then us and the designer can't get it there after a lot of hard work together, right? Because that last hurdle to make a game click on all of its pieces is difficult. So if the design still needs work, there is no guarantee that the publisher's going to get that game in good shape. They can make it look beautiful, but they might not just have that magic thing unless you've already brought that to the table.
Yeah.
We bought a game from one of the top designers in this industry and worked on it for 5 years and gave it back to him.
Yeah.
So it happens.
And by bought, you mean paid, like
Paid him.
Paid
a
him.
licensing fee?
Yeah, it was paid in
or-
advance against
Yeah, yeah.
royalty, and then
We
some
worked
additional
on it hard
money.
together,
And
and
no-
we just
no
all
dice.
agreed that we weren't going to get it finished.
To the point of the panel, the pitching your published, the other part about publishing that you get to know is that your game's going to get made. Even if your game gets accepted by a publisher, it might not get made.
Right.
All right.
Excellent, thank you.
Good question.
Thanks, yeah.
I love the tuna game.
Hello, I'm working on a 2-player abstract strategy game, and I'm curious if publishers are still interested in games like chess and checkers.
So I can take this one. So I sold a game to Cracker Barrel last year called Campobello. That was an outside design. That was an abstract game, right? So it's about finding cleverness to get those games, because the only place you're basically sell those games are educational stores, mind-focused hobby stores.
We got one on the schedule coming out next October.
Yeah.
We do have one on the schedule. We're
You're
taking
doing
it-
an abstract game.
We're doing an abstract game. It's
Good for you.
a 2 to 4
chess.
player. It's a 2 to 4 player game. We're making it as beautiful as it possibly can be. We think the game has a good opportunity to succeed. If I'm pitching that game to somebody, I would not use chess as my
Oh, God,
as
no.
my lead-in. Right? Like, take that word out of your lexicon. Talk about Suro and talk about some other games that are abstract strategy games, but that we sort of recoil from the word chess when a designer, says I've got a poker variant or a game that's like chess. So,
All right. Good luck.
All right, next up on the lightning round. We have 5 minutes to go.
Okay. 2 quick questions. One, if my game is expandable, would the game publisher come back to me when it's time for a new expansion? And 2, Sorry, I blanked. So that question.
So
If
if
you're
your
good at
game's
design, the answer is
expandable,
yes.
you should have the first expansion done when you sell the game.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think, right, like, if you're in talks with somebody, you wanna show the breadth of that game so that you're not chasing up to a success when the game gets released, right? If you don't have that ready, it can go both ways. We could take development over and just consult with you, or we could say to you, listen, we're not gonna publish your game until we know we have, expansions in the works.
We'd love to work with you if you do the expansions. It makes our lives easier.
Yeah. Paul Peterson does all the Smash Up expansions, so.
And never pitch a game saying it's good now, but it's better with expansions.
Oh, yeah, that's bad.
Because that's like saying I'm going to make a game that's going to fail, but after people don't buy it,
Right.
they'll buy more.
Right.
Also, is there any cross-pollination between games after you buy them? So is it possible, if I have like a really unique mechanic or whatever,
Yeah.
and maybe you don't like the rest of the game, but my mechanic might work in this game over there that you got, would you put that in there? And if,
Yeah, absolutely.
It happens.
would I get any credit for that?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's complicated.
Yeah, it gets complicated, but if you have a relationship with a game company, then, and they like something that you've done, there's a really good chance that they'll make a Reese's Peanut Butter Cup, take your idea with somebody else's idea and create a game.
Afternoon. So I've spent the past few years making a game. I created the art, I created the layout of the cards, it's a card game, created the rules, got a rule book, got it finished, of 10 products for here for me. I want to know, so I want two things to happen. A, I would like to bring to someone and be like, this is what I got, this is my understanding of the process, and I guess one of you guys or somebody will be like, okay, well, you maybe need a little filling in on X, Y, and Z. That's the first thing. Second thing I would like to happen is I would like that game to be my application and resume to a company to be like, if this gets published and I can make money from it, that's great. I honestly made this game as my application, so I have a place that I can go work 5 days a week, 9 to 5, or whatever your bloody hours are. And this is what I want to do with my life. I'm kind of aiming towards digital, but I'm totally cool with, like, a physical game. How likely are those things to happen for me?
So there are very few tabletop game companies with on-staff design. Those are your Fantasy Flights, your Wizards of the Coasts, your WizKids. I think they have some on-staff design. So it's challenging. I will say that for Fantasy Flight, if you design an expansion, the game you design is an expansion to one of their living card games, and they love it, yeah. If you're a Pro Tour level Magic player and they love you at Wizards of the Coast, optional, yeah. But I just want to applaud you for wanting an actual job in the industry, because at some point we're going to need those too, right?
Absolutely.
We need those people, yeah.
Sorry, I was like, full disclaimer, I'm lying. It's my girlfriend who's done that, but I do the talking and she does the actual shit in the relationship. So,
Well, I think answer to question one is we'd be happy, if you find us when we have a few minutes, we'd be happy to look at your thing and tell you what we think about it. That is easy.
awesome.
Job thing is a great idea. Having a finished prototype as a thing to show somebody and say, I want to work and this is the quality of my work, that's great.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Hey, we're more on the publishing manufacturing side, and wondering if you could speak a little bit more towards the aspect of like reducing costs. Specifically, I'm talking about like miniatures and that kind of thing.
Could you speak up to the last part of that question?
Just
please?
the very last
talking
bit.
about miniatures and that kind of thing.
Oh,
reducing
what
costs.
do miniatures cost to get done?
This will be our
Well,
last question. by the way.
like more, what they cost to get done, and what kind of cost reduction techniques and that kind of stuff.
We're going to try to get a couple more in. So an individual miniature costs about $1,000 to get it ready to actually make a miniature, right? That's a basic miniature, per miniature,
Yeah.
right? You have 20 different miniatures in a game. You've got $20,000 to $40,000 in costs in that game before you do anything.
And then you mold, and the molds can run, I don't know, is it
$800 each?
Yeah, 800 for the short run molds.
Yeah.
For the big run molds, you get up to like 50 grand if you cut steel.
Yeah. Per miniature.
Per miniature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
That's it, yeah. Good, yeah, come on.
Hi, I think I have a quick question. I'm working on some board games. I'd like to pitch to a publisher eventually, not ready yet.
Great.
But when I get to that point, I think we talked a little about having full creative control versus publisher and doing things in between. Like how much relationship with the designer for things like input into direction of art design, even if they're just as input, maybe even if you're going to have the final say.
So huge these days, actually. I think you look at a company like Alderac or Renegade Studios and that, we have amazing relationships with our designers, right? We have found people who not only make good games, but do have a creative vision for what they want to be able to do. And we have built our team around supporting those creative people rather than trying to do what they can do already.
Yeah, and
So-
if we liked you enough to pick up your game, we're also looking at you as potential future designer.
Yeah.
We're going to do everything we can to keep you happy.
Yeah.
Everything. Plus it's just nice.
All right, I'm
Yeah,
Ryan.
well.
This is Luke and John. We're out of here.
All right, so you two have
Come on up.
questions?
We have to leave the room.
Yeah, we'll answer your questions outside.
Yeah, we'll go out in the hallway if anyone else has any